I kinda already covered what it's like using a 4-inch phone nowadays, so check that video out if you want. Either way, I'm going back to this voiceover style just for a couple of videos. Hey guys, my name is Ryan Thomas with Failtech, and this is my look at the iPhone 5S a few years after its release. Let's talk bezels. This thing is some sizable boys. With a screen to body ratio damn near 61%, it's a big leap behind the latest offerings for any company, be it Samsung, LG, or even Apple themselves. Of course, that isn't the worst thing, it just means that the screen's not as close to the edges. It gives you more space to put your hands and thumbs when holding the phone in landscape, but overall doesn't do well for the aesthetic. The 4-inch 720p IPS screen is not the talk of the town, and it's just too small for my personal daily usage. But some of you like smaller screens, and that's great, and this phone is just for you. It's way sharp enough anyway. The body itself is like a slab, flat front, back and sides, that allows for a grippy feel in the hand without sacrificing on that stellar build quality. It's aluminium with some glass windows in the back, and I feel like the device has aged well too. The crisp volume up and down buttons and convenient silence switch on the side just adds to the almost utilitarian design. Most used units will likely have some scratches and dings in the sides. This one's been kept in a case almost all its life, which is pretty good and looks decent by most standards. It's funny, it's a huge contrast with the rounded backs and curved sides that we get from modern phones. But I've been checking out the Essential phone recently, and that kind of compares. Flat and minimal design, I don't know, it just works out. It's got flat sides and a flat back and no protrusions like a camera bump. It's just great. Of course, you do get a headphone jack with this one and a USB 2.0 lightning port, and it's really nice that you get a fingerprint scanner on such an old device. The first generation of Touch ID works, it's not fast, but it's more convenient than typing a pin in every time. The 8 megapixel sensor with f2.2 glass isn't the best at all, but it's not bad. It shoots 1080p at 30 fps and 720p at 120 fps. It's not the worst in the world. It takes some social media worthy photos and videos absolutely no problem. Looking back, I'm actually surprised about how usable the clips are even half a decade later. They aren't great, but damn, they're not bad. Unfortunately, you don't get optical image stabilization, but you do get that dual tone flash and quick and easy to use camera app. Not bad. The omission of the camera bump is super awesome and makes the phone feel more flush and less likely to get caught in something and break in your pocket. The selfie shooter isn't the best, it's a 1.2 megapixel, so no profile photos are hopefully going to be taken on this thing. But for Snapchat, it's not the worst. It shoots 720p videos too, which aren't great either, but overall you at least have a front shooter. The dual core Apple A7 coupled with 1GB of RAM is dated and doesn't scream like the rapid Apple A10 chip. But right, it's old, of course it's not going to scream. And whilst that's true, the LG G2, the Galaxy S4 and the Nexus 5 have all aged so much better when it comes to the performance, with double the RAM of the iPhone 5S. Now, you can run super simple 2D games with absolutely no issues, but with most smartphones having 3 to 4 times the RAM nowadays, don't expect anything high-end to run on the 5S. You're only getting it in 16, 32 or 64GB of storage with no expansion, which is enough for some, but not for others, so bear that in mind. The latest iOS at this point, 11.2, runs on this device. You will expect some slowdown, but this update of course will allow the device to run closer to 0 before it shuts off, which is the problem that I had with this phone. It used to happen a lot. The phone would legit turn off at 30%. I'd plug it in when it's on 5% and it would suddenly jump to 30. Multitasking is also a bit of a pain, but I'd definitely call this thing usable half a decade later. I actually had it as a daily for a month-ish, which wasn't bad. I just tended not to use my phone as often as I usually would, which can actually lead to a better life, so maybe I recommend it a bit. The only thing I would say with such a small body is that it does translate to a smaller battery life. It's not great if you keep the battery in there as a used device. You buy a new device and you won't have such a problem, but don't expect to be using this phone all day without charging the thing. The 1560 mAh battery is half the size of the average smartphone nowadays. Heck, some phones at the time even had double the battery size. A lot of users online are quoting 3 hours of screen on time, and I tend to agree. Of course, that all depends on what you use your phone for. For example, I mainly use emails, Twitter, check my YouTube analytics, stuff like that, so fairly mundane tasks compared to those of you who watch loads of video and play games all the time. You'll definitely need to get a battery case or an extended battery, but those of you with the skill, I'd recommend replacing the battery yourself if you can. Overall, I like how the 5S has aged, but if you like the design but are not so convinced on the hardware, you can go and pick up a used iPhone SE for around £60 more with much newer hardware specifications and a genuinely great camera. I would tend to lean towards that one, or maybe just go and buy a G3 for the same price as a 5S. Either way, you're going to get a much better experience, screen, camera, anything like that. And you get to install custom software if you pick the G3, which will hella improve your experience. The 5S is great, it's just not for me. Alright guys, that's it from me. If you enjoyed this video, then please leave your feedback below, and if you loved it, please be sure to subscribe. It means a hell of a lot to me. And if you loved the video more than that, then consider supporting me on Patreon so I can continue making the content you love. Thanks Ross lad. Anyway, my name is Ryan Thomas with Failtech, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.